Good evening. I am so pleased you have joined us tonight. My name is Jenny Gates-Beckman. I am the Director of Community Engagement and Education at the Jewish Federation of Omaha. This is the third and final program in what I've been personally calling the Rikers Summer Series, although that's not its official name. I say this since each session has been the brainchild of longtime leader in adult Jewish learning, Mr. Steve Rikers. The Jewish Federation has presented this series in collaboration with the following institutions. So we're going to put that up on the screen so I don't have to take too much time going through everyone who's really been a part of this. So Steve's vision for this program is to have a conversation inside the Omaha Jewish community about race and racial inequality. Now, I'll say, as is the case with practically everything the Federation and our agencies present, this of course includes the Jewish adjacent in our community. But I make this distinction to underline the fact that we've brought to this program two members of the Omaha Jewish community who are involved in race relations professionally. Jeannette Gabriel is the director of the Nate and Hannah Schwalb Center for Israel and Jewish Studies. Dr. Gabriel's work is related to American history and religion with an emphasis on issues of race and gender. Dr. Gabriel teaches classes in Judaic Studies that have been cross-listed with Women's Studies, History, and Black Studies, and one of her current research projects is exploring African American and Jewish collaboration and conflict. Gary Nachman is the regional director for the Anti-Defamation League, serving Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas. ADL is a leading anti-hate organization whose mission is to protect the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment for all. Mr. Nachman comes to this role with more than 20-year history with the ADL board, including service on the Regional Civil Rights Committee. We are aware fully that this could and should take years to unpack the many intersecting elements of Jewishness and race in America. Tonight, we're looking to provide a safe space to have an honest conversation and dialogue, allowing voices from various, voices representing the range of diverse views that exist in Omaha's Jewish community. We hope that this conversation piques your interest. There's so much more to discuss and learn, and opportunities for further exploration that are available both locally and nationally. This is the expertise of so many in our community who may be on this call, may not be on this call. Following this session, you will receive a list of resources to experience on your own, as well as a more comprehensive evaluation seeking input on what you would like to see the Omaha Jewish community pursue together. Tonight's program is going to fly by. It has three main parts. Dr. Gabriel and Mr. Nachman will begin with an introductory conversation to one another to set the stage for facilitated breakout sessions. Following the breakouts, we'll come back together to share highlights and allow our speakers to debrief. I'd now like to turn the mic over to Dr. Jeannette Gabriel.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you and, or at least see your names. Thanks for coming out this evening. We're very excited to begin what is going to be hopefully an ongoing dialogue, as Jenny mentioned, within the community. And certainly this fall, there are, and through the winter, there are a series of events and discussions that are going to take place. So Gary and I are just going to start off by discussing a few points that we hope will help frame the conversation. Do you want to begin, Gary?
Sure. Jeanette, what are some of the reasons that a movement for racial equality has emerged now?
So we really want to situate why there is a movement for racial equality that has emerged now. This is a movement that, of course, has emerged at many points throughout American history, but I think it's valuable to sort of highlight why it's happening in this moment. And I'm just going to mention a few contributing factors. And as part of that, I really want to say that this movement for racial justice is really in many ways focused on the institutional structures of racism and the failures of the society to solve the racial inequality that has existed throughout American history. And this really differentiates, a definition of racism really differentiates from like individual prejudice. This is institutional forces at work where power is exerted through a variety of institutional forces. We'll talk about the police, the courts, the government structures in a variety of ways. I want to highlight here a couple of reasons this is happening now. One is, of course, the ongoing police violence that disproportionately impacts communities of color. It's important to note that here in Omaha, where there were 4 racial uprisings in the late 60s and early 70s, that all 4 were linked to incidents of police brutality. So it's often these actions of police brutality that spark outrage and people taking to the streets. However, there are other factors, underlying factors that are exacerbating these tensions. The first is the cyclical nature of how our politics works. Many people expected that with the election of a Black president, that the United States would be able to fundamentally address the structures of racism. And yet, President Obama, in his 8 years of term, was not able to do that. Perhaps it's asking too much from an individual president when there are such deeply embedded racial structures in the society. There is then both a backlash against the Obama era that we see through right-wing racist vigilante terrorists, which Gary will talk more about, and also a deep dissatisfaction that this electing a Black president didn't result in more progress and change. All this is additionally exacerbated by the impact of the COVID-19 crisis. As people are pushed out of public spaces and into private spaces, this exacerbates the inequalities in society. People who have large homes with backyards are living much better lives than people who are in tiny apartments where there are extended family members living on top of each other. So all throughout the world, we see tensions of inequality intensified. And in the United States, that has historically played out racially because of the deep seated problems of race in America. So I would suggest those are some of the reasons that we see a movement for racial justice today. I now want to ask Gary about ADL and how ADL has adopted a broad view of fighting hatred in all of its forms, because I think that's really relevant to the conversation tonight in terms of what the Jewish community has done historically and continues to do to fight hatred.
Thank you, Jeannette. Thank you, Steve Reiches, for creating this opportunity and allowing the community a safe space to have this conversation. I'm reminded of the poem by the German Lutheran pastor, Martin Niemöller. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So ADL fights anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry and discrimination, defending democratic ideals and civil rights for all. We're a leading voice on religious freedom issues, combating hate crimes and bullying, advocating for immigration reform and refugee rights, advancing LGBTQ rights, safeguarding the right to vote, as well as promoting racial justice. ADL has been the lead architect of federal and state hate crime laws across the US. In fact, 45 states have hate crime laws as a result. ADL is the nation's only leading civil rights group that also partners with law enforcement, helping train with anti-bias and anti-hate education. Hate against anyone means there is no justice for everyone. We support the Black community always. We recognize and understand the moral imperative to address systemic racism. It is important in understanding racism that this despicable treatment is one form of hate. I now want to show you a diagram called the pyramid of hate. Our job and the job of educators is to stem the damage caused by society as biases are allowed to become ingrained into attitudes that can manifest into acts of violence. We like to say, you can wait for hate or you can educate. So I need to be able to share my screen. Thumbs up, you can see. So the pyramid of hate starts at its base with biased attitudes, stereotyping, insensitive remarks, fear of differences, non-inclusive languages, and microaggressions, followed by acts of bias, bullying, ridicule, name-calling, slurs, epithets, social avoidance, dehumanization, bias, and belittling jokes. Our job is to keep from escalating up the pyramid. So these acts of bias are followed by discrimination, economic, political, educational, employment, housing, and segregation. Omaha is not immune to this. Omaha was very much a part of the redlining history that took place throughout the country that still has consequences today in the Black community. Look at North and South Omaha. These are products that took place. These are a byproduct of something that took place almost 80, 90 years ago that are still affecting us today. Bias-motivated violence, murder, rape, assault, arson, terrorism. These are the things that we see from some of the extremist groups. And finally, the top of the pyramid is genocide. Sadly, genocide has not escaped the world today. We still see it in other parts of the world. So I would like to ask Jeannette another question. So let me stop sharing here. We're part of a multi-ethnic and multiracial Jewish community, and yet the normative view of a Jew in the US, both inside and outside of the Jewish community, is a white Ashkenazi Jew from Eastern Europe. Given that, or aside from that, what are some of the ways Omaha's Jewish community has engaged in movements for racial equality?
Yeah, I think this is a really important point for us to talk about early in the evening, because hopefully later on in the discussions and in the closing remarks, many of you will have ideas of what the Jewish community in Omaha today might want to do going forward in response to the current movement for racial justice. It's worth looking at our past. The movement, the Omaha Jewish community, first of all, has been complex. There has never been a united position about how to respond to the movement for racial justice. And that mirrors the Jewish community nationally. There's sort of an embedded myth that the Jewish community always supported the civil rights movement, but it's important to note the complexity of opinions within the Jewish community and to recognize that there is a great diversity of views and that there always has been. And we want this to be a space tonight where people feel free to discuss those various points of view. Having said that, there has been active engagement in the Omaha Jewish community around issues of racial injustice really from the 1930s going forward. There's been a variety of organizations that have worked closely with different groups within the African American community within Omaha, and the migration out of the South continued well into the 60s in Omaha, so there was new community coming in all the time. There was, and I want to focus in on a couple of those experiences. One was an organization called Inclusive Communities that began in 1938 as a coalition of religious organizations that were working to combat discrimination. And this was started by a Christian business owner who owned Nebraska Clothing Company, who was asked to engage in a boycott of Jewish businesses, a secret boycott. And Inclusive Communities over the years has done extensive work, and the Jewish community has been heavily involved in that, on racial issues in the 40s, dealing with rural poverty and Native American issues in the 50s and 60s, issues of sexuality and substance abuse in the 60s, police relations and Black communities, racial isolation in public schools in the 70s and 80s, and equal employment and affirmative action and Muslim and Christian relations in the 80s and 90s. We see a continuation of this tradition in the Tri-Faith Initiative here in Omaha. I also think it's important to note the very active role that the Omaha Jewish community played in housing equality. And this mirrors activism across the country within Jewish communities in seeking equal rights, housing laws that would ensure a lack of discrimination in housing. There was an Omaha Interfaith Housing Organization that Rabbi Brooks was heavily involved with and worked steadily to try to pass legislation in Nebraska. Legislation was not passed until 1969 and was heavily supported with the activism of the National Council of Jewish Women, of which Mrs. Jane Brooks was very involved. These are just a few little examples. I do want to note that while this work is admirable, when we look at the conditions in Omaha today, very little progress has been made. 68% of the North Omaha community is Black in the 2010 census, which is a quarter of the Black population in the entire region. Not only are home ownership levels considerably lower due to historic redlining policies that refused mortgages and imposed predatory lending practices on communities of color, and those continue up into the current day, but that has sweeping implications for people's lives. We see in North Omaha that household income is lower, education levels are lower, poverty and unemployment levels are higher, household income is lower, and health insurance coverage is lower. So while we can say, yes, there has been activism on the part of Omaha's Jewish community, we have to ask ourselves why the Omaha Jewish community moved west and the African American community remained isolated in North Omaha without access to resources to leave. And I raise that very controversial question to us tonight, not as a judgment, but as a moment for reflection of how we can engage in dialogue and allyship, but the daily conditions of life are fundamentally different between the two communities. So we're just going to do one more question here. I want to ask Gary to address some of the ways that anti-Semitic organizations have been involved in obstructing the current protests for racial equality. You're muted, Gary.
Sorry about that. While many of the groups involved in monitoring and in many cases obstructing the protests are indeed anti-Semitic, their purpose by and large is to take advantage of testing the limits of authority and the boundaries that society will allow them to operate in the open. Extremist memberships and movements that we follow primarily fall into two categories. They're either anti-government, anti-authoritarian, or they fall under the anti-Semitism, racism, anti-LGBTQ, Islamophobic, and anti-liberal views. Far-right extremists use national issues to recruit, radicalize, and potentially mobilize hardcore adherents toward violence against others, while far-left extremist violence, often visibly dramatic, primarily results in, I don't want to say just property damage, but property damage as opposed to loss of life. Since 2008, far-right actors have killed more individuals than Islamists and far-left actors combined. Some believe that it's easier to comprehend that white supremacists or anarchists are leading the charge than it is to accept that Americans are so angry, so fundamentally outraged at the state of their country that they are willing to take to the streets, push back against a militarized police force, and risking serious injury or arrest. And we've seen these groups nationally. Let's see. Sorry, I'm going to have to go through some slides to get to where I need to be. So some of the national groups we've seen Antifa accelerationist groups. These are groups that are promoting the next civil war. Other groups, and to be honest, we normally will spend about 20 minutes to half an hour just on each of these groups describing what they do. But these are national extremist groups that some have come through Omaha, most are national. Excuse me. They express their rants and in internet chat rooms like 4chan, BitChute, Gab, and Telegram. We've seen local groups as well. We've seen the postering in West Omaha. We've seen the temple in Lincoln desecrated. We've seen the swastika with the hangman's noose at Zrinski Lake. We saw over Dodge Street, many of you may have seen the Patriot Front banner that was right over Dodge Street. Most are still in the lower rungs of the pyramid of hate, but the energy needed to advance to the next level is not great. One last thing I wanted to share, if I can get to it, is ADL has what is called a heat map. And the heat map is an interactive map that you can go to adl.org, and any of these circles will show acts of anti-Semitism, terrorism, white supremacist events. And it's fascinating to see, it's sadly fascinating to see. There are many great resources regarding not just anti-Semitism, but a great deal on racism, bias, and how you can get involved in fighting hate for good. Jenny, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right. So at this point, so sorry, I didn't know it was being turned over to me. Let's do, we're about to go into breakout rooms, and that's going to be done randomly, and you won't have to do anything that is not asked of you, meaning you will get a little button that says, you're being put into this breakout room, press this. And so you press the button and then you'll appear in a small room, and there'll be a facilitator in there to help guide you through the following questions, which if we could put those up We will also put them in the chat. Oh, not the questions, the ground rules. I wanted to read the ground rules because I think it's important to just have a foundation of respect. So ground rules include respectfully taking turns speaking, not interrupting, refrain from dominating the conversation, include everyone, speak from your own experiences, avoid generalization, use I instead of they, we, or you, refrain from attacking or blaming other participants, listen to others with respect, try to learn about others' experiences, perspectives, and interests. And this event is open to people from all walks of life, so we're not looking to proselytize. So those are our basic ground rules, and your facilitator should be helping you walk through questions once we all arrive in our new location. After that, we're going to come back together and debrief a bit. Sound good? It's like magic transportation. Say join. Yay! I think we're waiting for everyone to come back in, and
I feel like the transporter just beamed me into the Enterprise without my permission.
right. It's like you can't resist. Resistance is futile. There you go.
That's right.
So I know our facilitators were keeping some notes, hopefully, of what the discussions entailed in your breakout groups. And if you can take a moment to share those in the chat. I know that Jeannette and Gary both facilitated their own chats, so maybe you can start with some reflections from your own chats while we enter in our notes from those that you were not present for.
By the way, as your rabbi, I would like to ask you, what are you planning to do as a continuation with this conversation? Don't leave us hanging in the air.
Absolutely. I think Jenny's going to address that at the end, but I just want to say that the passionate conversation that took place in my breakout room makes it really clear that there is a need to continue this dialogue, that there is not one or even three different opinions on these topics within our own Jewish community, and there never has been, but there is a real need to engage in these conversations and to think about ways that the community is going to respond to a national movement for racial injustice.
I think we will continue to find safe spaces to have these kinds of conversations, not just within the Jewish community, but within the entire community, communities of color, communities of different ethnicities that we
Gary,
want to be able to learn. Yes,
yeah,
sir.
can you make a promise that you will be responsible to continue this? Because we had other conversation in this town and basically nothing emerged out of it. So I want you to give me your word that you will take care of this.
I give you my word.
Thank you.
I will also just jump in for a second because I know that the Beit Midrash, Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, is also going to continue addressing
It's
this topic.
it's part of my closing remarks.
I didn't know that you were going to do that, so I didn't see that in your notes to me. But
and I just really quickly, I want to challenge back to Rabbi from former educator to student that there is no answer to this. It's an ongoing journey together.
Well, I guess I would ask Rabbi if you would please tell us what you think the next appropriate step would be.
The next one is to join all the marches downtown and be part of that amazing body of people. When we sweat next to each other, that's when something is created.
Can we join the counter march?
You mean the one with the uniforms from Germany? Which one exactly?
No, the ones that are like for the police, the pro blue.
Why not?
Okay, that's good, because I joined that, and there was a great demonstration for the police at Memorial Park, and Black Lives Matter was there to demonstrate against it, and I think they showed themselves to be pretty pathetic.
So we're gonna,
can I say something? Can I be muted or whatever?
Yeah, you're good. Keep going.
Can I say something? Do I have the floor? Yeah. Okay, I think there needs to be ongoing safe conversations between all people, but not just the people, you know, the African American, Hispanic, and us, but the police as well. Rather than these marches for and against, let's have some conversation with them as well.
I agree with
Gary,
that. I think that the adversarial relationship is the adversarial we versus them march of people of goodwill is a phony issue, and it's basically the result of political manipulation. There's there really are common interests, and the idea that there are pro-police marches that are counter to BLM is I think a fake issue. That I think most police in Omaha, and I think we have a decent police force here, really do have strong and in some cases very, very productive relationships with the Black community. And to pose this and to present this as two warring factions is really part of the problem that underlies our political situation in the country right now.
I guess I'd just like to add a little bit of historical perspective that while police brutality has been a problem all throughout American history, we really saw a shift after the first Gulf War as police departments were militarized. Military equipment that came back from the Gulf War went into police departments. So police departments are now very different, look very different than police departments in the early, in the 80s and 90s. And that's, I think that sometimes we hear this rhetoric of anti-police, and I would suggest that there's nuance there about concerns about the militarization of the police. And, when people are outside of movements, they tend to only hear slogans and don't see the discussions and diversity of thought that really exists within a movement. And perhaps that's what going out and having greater dialogue and discourse will enrich all of our perspectives that way.
I think you're right. But I just always wonder, why is there a problem with militarizing police? I mean, I want them to have better guns than the punks.
I'll just add that I disagree with you respectfully, that you're super entitled to your opinion. And I'm curious whether or not the Jewish community is going to be ready to decide whether we're going to stand up for the unequal treatment of generations of people, or if we're going to put our own needs ahead and our own privilege ahead of the needs of people in our community who are literally dying.
Who's dying?
Who is Black and brown
people are dying.
And if I may be so bold, this is exactly why there need to be Black people and brown people on this panel. And this is a huge issue that this panel is being held with two white people who are using an outdated model, and that is the pyramid of hate.
Isn't
Because
that
hate is not actually the reason that racism exists. It is actually systemic. It is a systemic issue that is linked to policies, the creation of whiteness when this land was colonized. So I would enjoy the panelists actually addressing why that choice was made.
Well, Rachel, I would start off by saying perhaps you missed my definition of racism as a systemic structure at the beginning.
I did not.
We were very careful to make sure that we differentiated between discrimination, which is actions of individuals, versus structures of racism. I really appreciate your comments, and I'm going to be part of other events throughout this fall that have diversity in panels. This is just one event. It doesn't represent the end all of sort of the message of the Jewish community.
I want to make sure we watch our time. It is 8 o'clock. I don't want to be cutting off, so I know that there are a few more things that need to be said, but I don't want to have this circle into back and forth.
Yes.
So Amanda?
Yeah, Jenny, and I do think that this is a good place to stop, but in terms of further engagements, I would, so that this is on the record and within the recording, especially to the Federation population that work within the Federation, that I am a Jew of color that is a Latina who works within the Jewish professional sphere. And I do actively do work for Tri-Faith on the regards of race and religion. And we are starting up a specific task force to deal with race and religion. And so I invite you all to start participating in those discussions. But then also I really extend the invite to the Federation to invite me in to do some of these conversations as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Could you post her diagram, because I came in a little late.
We're gonna be sharing all of the materials that were shared during this. The full session is recorded, and we are planning on many resources will be shared. Before I close out, Gary or Jeannette, do you have any other points that you wanted to make?
I just wanted to make the comment that I appreciate everybody's comments, that this was meant to be a safe place, regardless of whether you agreed or disagreed with us. And that is the most important message. In order for us to have these conversations, people need to feel that they can express their passionate views without being challenged or offended.
Yeah, I would agree with Gary. I was really pleased at our breakout room that people were so passionate and so articulate. It's exciting, and I can't wait to have these conversations with all of you again.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I was not kidding when I said that this time was going to fly by. So I'm glad you've joined us.
Oh, here.
Margot, does Steve want to say something?
Yeah, I'm trying to get in.
I have a question for
you.
Gary can perhaps clear up. In the last few days, there's been this, at least news about the rise of QAnon. And this QAnon, I take it, is probably both anti-Semitic and, anti-Black and a few other antis. Can you clarify? Because that seems like a really dangerous level, which is sweeping parts of our country.
I will address it briefly, but know that this is a long discussion, Steve. I can tell you QAnon believe that the world governments are being controlled by a shadowy cabal known as the deep state of pedophiles who will be brought to justice by President Trump. They use cryptic messages to disguise their anti-Semitic and racist views. And I'm going to leave it at that because it's not a cohesive, organized group.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. And really, like, I'll continue with my remarks because I know I have in here somewhere that there will be many more opportunities for remarks. So I want to thank first and foremost our speakers, Dr. Jeannette Gabriel and Gary Nachman, as well as all of our facilitators who stepped up to help with our group breakouts, our community professionals, and all of you, the participants. We're sharing more in follow-up, but I do want to single out one opportunity that is being put forth again this year. The community Beit Midrash, which was begun last year, or Beit Midrash means house of study. It's a weekly learning collaboration between the JFO and the community's senior rabbis, which began last year and is expanding in the coming year to include all of the clergy members. So the topics for this fall include the following. Can you page forward? So this is the Jewish vote. On the election, in God's image, Jewish views on race, diversity, and justice. The future is now, reimagining Judaism for a post-pandemic world, and Judaism and the glass ceiling.
Are you going to be able to invite all the rabbis or just the senior rabbis? You know, there are some rabbis in town.
Maybe you could get an invitation, sir. You should contact me later. We'll talk through that. So save 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. It begins in October. You are now going to see a quick poll. Okay, quick poll. The quick poll is 4 quick questions. These are the super quick questions. Go ahead and fill it out. And once you fill it out, you're welcome to go. But after that poll, you will receive a follow-up email with an opportunity to give more feedback. And
informative. All right.
I'm sorry. Hold on. Okay. So once you fill out this form, you can go. But there's a follow-up email with resources, an opportunity to answer more in-depth reflection questions and give feedback and really ask you what you envision the next steps being. So I thank you all for participating and look forward to future conversations.